The ink wasn't even dry on the settlement papers when Graham Prentice checked his Rolex, annoyed that discarding his wife of 10 years was taking longer than a board meeting. He thought he had pulled off the perfect heist, stripping Lane of every asset, every penny and every ounce of dignity in exchange for a quick exit. He believed she was broken destitute and permanently silenced. He was wrong. 3 months later, the deafening roar of a customized Gulfstream G650ER would interrupt his victory lap outside the Superior Court. The woman stepping onto the tarmac wasn't the trembling housewife he had thrown away. She was a force of nature who had just acquired the one thing money couldn't buy: leverage. This is the story of how walking away with nothing became the most expensive mistake her husband ever made. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room on the 42nd floor of the chaotic Manhattan skyline, blurring the city lights into grey streaks. Inside, the atmosphere was colder than the November wind, biting at the glass. Lane Prentice sat perfectly still. Her hands folded in her lap were the only things holding her together. Across the mahogany table sat Graham. He wasn't looking at her. He was scrolling through his phone, a smirk playing on his lips, likely texting the woman who was currently redecorating Lane's master bedroom in Greenwich. "Sign here, Mrs. Prentice, and here, and initial the bottom of page 32. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson with a suit that cost more than Lane's parents had made in a lifetime, pushed the stack of documents toward her. His tone was bored, clinically detached. To him, this was just another Tuesday, another high-net-worth divorce, where the earner kept the gold and the spouse got the dust. Lane picked up the pen. It felt heavy like a lead weight. Just to reiterate, Henderson droned on, adjusting his glasses. By signing this uncontested agreement, you are waiving all rights to spousal support, the Greenwich estate, the Hamptons property, and any future claims on Prentice Holdings. You are accepting the lump sum of $50,000 as a relocation kindness, and you agree to vacate the premises by midnight tonight. $50,000 for 10 years. She had built Prentice Holdings with him. She had used her graphic design background to create the branding that launched his first tech startup. She had hosted the dinners, charmed the investors, and nursed him through the panic attacks when the market crashed in 2018. She had sacrificed her own career, her own savings, and her youth. "Graham." Lane spoke softly. Graham didn't look up. "What is it, Lane? I have a dinner reservation at Le Bernardin in an hour. Let's speed this up. Is this really how you want to end it, with me on the street?" Finally, he looked at her. His eyes, once the warm hazel she had fallen in love with, were now hard, polished flint. "You're not on the street, Lane. You have 50 grand. That's more than you had when I met you waiting tables in Brooklyn. Consider it severance pay for a job. Adequately done." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper. "Look, you're boring, Lane. You're plain. You wear department store sweaters and worry about coupons. I'm a billionaire. I need someone who shines. Someone like Sienna. Don't make this ugly. If you fight me, I'll bury you in legal fees until you're begging for change in the subway. Take the check. Go." The cruelty took her breath away, sharp and physical, like a punch to the gut. She looked at the papers. If she fought, he was right. He had teams of sharks like Henderson. She had nothing, no family left, no savings he hadn't drained or hidden in offshore accounts she couldn't access. Silence stretched in the room, thick and suffocating. Lane uncapped the pen. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply signed her name. Lane Prentice. With each stroke, she felt a strange sensation. It wasn't defeat. It was the severing of a limb that had been gangrenous for years. "Done," she whispered. Graham snatched the papers away before the ink dried. checking the signature like a bank teller, inspecting a suspicious bill. "Good girl. The check is with the receptionist. Leave your house keys on the table." Lane stood up. She placed the key fob to the Greenwich mansion, the house she had hand-painted, the garden she had planted onto the cold wood. "Goodbye, Graham." Yeah. Have a nice life." He was already dialing a number, his back turning to her. "Sienna, it's done. Champagne is on ice." Lane walked out of the office past the receptionist, who handed her an envelope with a pitying look, and into the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught her reflection in the polished brass. She looked tired. Her trench coat was old. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked exactly like what Graham said. She was a discarded, middle-aged woman with nothing. She stepped out into the pouring rain of Midtown. She didn't hail a cab. She wanted to save the money. She walked toward the subway station, the $50,000 check burning a hole in her pocket. It seemed like a lot of money to some, but in New York City, starting from zero, it was a ticking clock. She found a cheap motel in Queens, the kind with neon signs that buzzed and flickered. Sitting on the lumpy mattress, she opened her suitcase, the only thing she had taken. Inside were her clothes, a few old photo albums, and a battered laptop she hadn't turned on in 3 years. She lay back, staring at the water-stained ceiling. The tears finally came then. Not for Graham, but for the time she had wasted, for the woman she had let herself become, to please a man who saw her as an accessory that had gone out of style. But as the sobbing subsided, a cold clarity replaced it. Graham had made one critical error. He thought Lane was just a housewife. He had forgotten that before she was Mrs. Prentice, she was Lane Vance, the top forensic accounting student in her university class. She had dropped out to support his dream, but she hadn't forgotten the numbers. And she knew something Mr. Henderson didn't. Every year for tax season, Graham made her organize his messy receipts. He thought she just filed them. He didn't know she read them. He didn't know she remembered the shell companies in the Caymans, the consulting fees paid to non-existent firms in Zurich, and the erratic transfers to a relentless list of pseudonyms. Lane sat up and opened the battered laptop. It groaned as it booted up, the screen flickering. She connected to the motel's spotty Wi-Fi. "You want boring, Graham?" she whispered to the empty room. "I'll show you boring. I'm going to audit your entire life." The screen glowed blue in the dark room. She didn't need a lawyer yet. She needed proof. And she had nothing but time. The next morning, Lane didn't look for an apartment. She went to a public library. She needed a quiet place with faster internet. She spent 12 hours that day cross-referencing public records of Prentice Holdings with the photographic memory she had of those messy receipts. It was around 4 p.m. on the third day of her new life when she saw him. She was sitting in a corner of the library, surrounded by stacks of paper, looking frantic. A man was sitting 2 tables away. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, wearing a tweed jacket that had seen better days, and reading a thick book on maritime law. He had a kind face, weathered by sun and age, with shock-white hair. Lane's stomach growled loudly. She hadn't eaten since a bagel at 6 a.m. The man looked up, his eyes twinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses. He reached into his bag and pulled out a green apple. He rolled it across the table toward her. "Fuel," he said simply. "You look like you're trying to solve the Enigma code over there." Lane blushed, catching the apple. "Something like that." "Thank you." "I'm Arthur," the man said. "I usually sit there, but you looked like you were building a fortress, so I ceded the territory. I'm Lane, and I'm sorry. I can move." "Nonsense," Arthur smiled. "I like the energy. It's focused, vengeful, perhaps, or just determined? Lane paused. She looked at this stranger. There was something disarming about him. A bit of both, she admitted. My husband, ex-husband, thinks I'm an idiot. I'm trying to prove I'm not. Arthur nodded slowly. The worst mistake a man can make is underestimating the person who knows where the skeletons are buried. What line of work is he in? Tech, real estate. Fraud mostly if I can prove it. Arthur's eyebrows shot up. Fraud. That is a heavy word, Lane. He has accounts in the Cayman Islands under the name Blue Heron LLC. He thinks they're untraceable because he washes the money through a charity foundation. But the charity has no overhead. Arthur stopped smiling. He closed his book. He stood up and walked over to her table, looking down at her spreadsheet. He studied the numbers for a long moment, his demeanor shifting from kindly grandfather to something sharper, more predatory. You found the wash cycle, Arthur murmured. Most people miss the charity overhead variance. You caught it in... How long? 3 days, Lane said. Arthur looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. You have a talent, Lane, but you're going about this the hard way. Public records will only get you so far. You need the bank ledgers. I can't get those. I'm nobody. Nobody is a powerful thing to be, Arthur said. He reached into his tweed pocket and pulled out a card. It wasn't a business card. It was a plain white card with a single phone number handwritten on it. I have let's call it a hobby. I help people find things that are lost, or hide things that need hiding. Call this number at exactly 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. Ask for the archivist. Who are you? Lane asked, holding the card. Just a man who appreciates a good audit, Arthur winked. And Lane, buy yourself a better sandwich. You can't take down a billionaire on an empty stomach. He walked away, leaving Lane with an apple a mystery number, and the first spark of hope she had felt in months. She didn't know it yet, but the man in the tweed jacket wasn't just a library regular. Arthur Calloway was the retired CEO of Calloway Steel, a man worth $14 billion who had spent the last decade living quietly because he was bored of sycophants. He had been looking for a protege, someone with grit, and he had just found her eating a green apple in a Queen's library. But Graham Prentice was moving fast. Across town in the penthouse, Lane used to clean. Graham was popping a bottle of Dom Perignon. To freedom. Graham toasted clinking glasses with Sienna, a 24-year-old model who was already eyeing the diamond bracelet on her wrist. Did she cry? Sienna asked, giggling. She didn't say a word, just signed and left, like a ghost. Good, Sienna purred. Ghosts can't hurt us. Graham laughed. She's probably in a trailer park by now. Forget her. He had no idea that the ghost was currently dialing a number that would bring his entire empire crashing down. The war had begun, and Graham was the only one who didn't know he was on the battlefield. The phone rang exactly once before it was answered. State your purpose. A voice clipped, mechanical, and devoid of warmth. Lane stood in the narrow alley behind the motel, shielding her phone from the morning drizzle. I'm calling for the archivist. Arthur told me to call. Reference code. Lane blinked. He gave me a green apple, and he said I found the wash cycle. There was a pause, a long, static-filled silence that made Lane think she had been hung up on. Then the voice returned, human this time, sounding amused. The apple. Very well. A car will collect you at your current coordinates in 15 minutes. Do not be late. 15 minutes later, a matte black sedan with tinted windows rolled up to the curb. The driver, a mountain of a man with a neck thick as a tree stump, opened the door without a word. Lane hesitated, clutching her laptop bag. This was insane. She was getting into a stranger's car based on a conversation with an old man in a library. But then she remembered Graham's laugh as he dismissed her. She remembered the $50,000 check that felt like a severance package for her life. She got in. The car didn't take her to a warehouse or a shady back room. It drove straight into the heart of the financial district, pulling up to the curb of the monolithic Callaway Tower, a building of steel and glass that pierced the clouds. Top floor. The driver grunted, handing her a keycard. Lane rode the elevator alone, her ears popping, as the numbers climbed 50, 60, 70, 85. The doors slid open to reveal not an office, but a sanctuary. The walls were lined with books, floor to ceiling. A fire crackled in a stone hearth large enough to stand in. And there, sitting behind a desk made of reclaimed airplane wing, was Arthur. He wasn't wearing the tweed jacket today. He was wearing a navy bespoke suit that whispered power. "You came," Arthur said, not looking up from a file he was reading. "Most people don't. They get scared. They take the 50 grand and move to Ohio." "I don't like Ohio," Lane said, stepping onto the plush Persian rug. "And I don't like losing." Arthur looked up, closing the file. "Good. Because Graham Prentice is about to have a very good year. He's planning to take Prentice Holdings public on the London Stock Exchange. The IPO is projected to make him a billionaire 3 times over. If he succeeds, he will be untouchable." Lane felt a cold knot in her stomach. He can't go public. The books are cooked. If regulators see the Blue Heron accounts... "He's hidden Blue Heron," Arthur interrupted. "As of this morning, those accounts have been wiped, dissolved. The money has been moved." "Moved where?" That Arthur stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the city. "Is what you are going to find out. I know Graham is a fraud. I've known for years. He stole a proprietary algorithm from my firm in 2015, the code that built his empire. But I couldn't prove it. He's slippery. He covers his tracks with layers of shell core and payoffs." Arthur turned to face her, his eyes intense. "I don't just want to sue him, Lane. I want to obliterate his legacy. I want to buy Prentice Holdings for $1 when the stock crashes. But I can't do it from the outside. I need someone who knows how he thinks. Someone who knows his passwords, his habits, his tells." "I know all of them," Lane said, her voice steady. "I know he uses his mother's birthday for his personal safe, but the date his first dog died for his digital encryptions. I know he keeps physical backups of everything because he's paranoid about hackers. He keeps a black ledger. He calls it his doomsday book." Arthur's eyes widened slightly. "A physical ledger in 2024. He doesn't trust the cloud with the incriminating stuff. He says the cloud has ears." Arthur smiled a slow, predatory grin. "Where is this book?" "It used to be in the Greenwich house. But if he's smart, and he moved it when he kicked me out. He would keep it close. Somewhere he feels is sacred." "Find the book, Lane," Arthur said. "Bring me the book and I will give you the world. I will fund your legal team. I will hire the best forensic accountants to back you up. I will give you a platform to burn him to the ground." "I don't have the resources to find it," Lane admitted. "I have a motel room and a laptop from 2019. Arthur pressed a button on his desk. The heavy oak doors opened and a young woman walked in. She was sharp-dressed in a sleek black suit, holding a tablet. "This is Beatrice," Arthur said. "She is your handler. You are no longer Lane Prentice, the discarded housewife. From this moment, you are a consultant for Callaway Industries. You will have an unlimited expense account, a secure apartment in Tribeca, and access to my security team. Lane looked at Beatrice, then back at Arthur. Why? Why do this for me? Because, Arthur said, his voice softening just a fraction, I had a daughter once. She married a man like Graham. He broke her. She didn't fight back. She faded away. He cleared his throat, the moment of vulnerability vanishing as quickly as it came. I don't like bullies, Lane, and I have more money than God. So let's have some fun. Beatrice stepped forward. Mrs. Prentice, if you'll come with me. We have work to do. We need to update your wardrobe, your tech, and your identity. You're going to the Prentice annual gala next week. The gala? Lane asked. He'll recognize me. Not. Beatrice smirked, looking Lane up and down. When we're done with you. The Prentice annual charity gala was the event of the season. Held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, it was a convergence of old money, new tech wealth, and the desperate social climbers trying to bridge the gap. Graham Prentice stood at the top of the grand staircase, a glass of scotch in hand. He looked impeccable in a Tom Ford tuxedo. Beside him, Sienna shimmered in a silver dress that left little to the imagination. She was bored scrolling through Instagram on her phone, occasionally looking up to offer a vapid smile to a passing senator. Put the phone away, Graham hissed under his breath. The board is watching. Chill, babe, Sienna snapped, though she lowered the phone. This is boring. When can we leave? When I secure the vote from the Asian markets, Graham muttered. He scanned the room. He felt like a king. He had done it. The divorce was finalized. Lane was gone, and the IPO was weeks away. He was invincible. At the entrance, a hush fell over the crowd. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the hall like a wave. Graham frowned, looking down toward the door. Who is that? Walking through the entrance was a woman who looked like she had been carved from moonlight. She wore a deep emerald gown that hugged every curve made of velvet that seemed to swallow the light. Her hair, which Graham remembered as mousy and always tied back, was a cascading river of chestnut waves. She wore diamonds at her throat, serious diamonds, the kind that required a security detail. But it was the way she walked that confused him. Chin-up eyes sharp, moving with a predator's grace. Is that... Sienna squinted. Is that your ex? Graham laughed nervously. Lane buys her clothes at outlets. That woman is wearing haute couture, and look at who she's with. The woman was on the arm of a handsome younger man, Arthur's son, Dominic Calloway, a known playboy and fierce corporate shark. They moved through the crowd, shaking hands. Graham watched, transfixed. As they got closer, the woman turned her head. Her eyes locked onto his. It was Lane, but it wasn't the Lane he knew. The warmth was gone. Her eyes were ice cold. She offered him a small, polite nod, the kind one gives to a servant, and turned her attention back to Dominic, laughing at something he whispered. It is her, Sienna gasped. What is she doing here? I don't know, Graham growled, setting his glass down, but I'm going to find out. He marched down the stairs, cutting through the crowd. He approached them near the Temple of Denda. Lane, Graham said, his voice tight. Lane turned slowly, as if interrupted from a very important thought. Oh. Hello, Graham. What are you doing here? This is a private event. Tickets were $5,000 a plate. Dominic invited me, Lane said smoothly, gesturing to her companion. We're discussing a potential partnership. I'm consulting for Calloway Industries now. Graham felt the blood drained from his face. Calloway. You don't know the first thing about business. I know enough, Lane smiled, and it was a terrifying sight. I know about overhead variances. I know about offshore routing. I know about... Blue Heron. She dropped the name softly like a feather. Graham froze. His eyes darted around to see if anyone had heard. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't, Lane said. Enjoy your evening, Graham. The shrimp is excellent, though I hear the main course is going to be hard to swallow. She took Dominic's arm and walked away, leaving Graham standing there, sweating in his $5,000 suit. She knows, Graham whispered to himself. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced his arrogance. He pulled out his phone and texted his head of security, a man named Hugo. Check the safe. Now. The one at the boathouse. Across the room, Lane felt her phone buzz in her clutch. She didn't look at it. She knew what it said. She had cloned Graham's phone 3 days ago when he was at the gym using a proximity scanner Beatrice had given her. She read the text on her own screen. Check the safe. Now. The one at the boathouse. Lane squeezed Dominic's arm. The boathouse, she whispered. He didn't move it to the office. He moved it to his private retreat in the Catskills. Dominic nodded, keeping his smile plastered on for the cameras. Arthur has a team on standby. But the boathouse is a fortress. Biometric locks. Voice recognition. I know his voice, Lane said. I have recordings of him from our wedding video from voicemails. Beatrice synthesized them. And I have his fingerprints. How? Dominic asked. Lane pulled a champagne flute from a passing tray. She held it up. From when he grabbed my arm at the lawyer's office. I kept the coat. I lifted the print myself. Dominic looked at her with genuine admiration. Remind me never to divorce you. Focus, Dominic. We have the location. But we need the physical key. He keeps it on him. Always. Lane scanned Graham across the room. He was looking agitated, drinking heavily now. He kept patting the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket. Left breast pocket, Lane noted. He's checking it every 30 seconds. It's there. So we need to pickpocket a billionaire surrounded by security guards. Dominic mused. Easy. I don't need to pickpocket him, Lane said, her eyes narrowing. I just need him to take the jacket off. And how do you propose to do that? Lane spotted a waiter carrying a tray of red wine. She calculated the trajectory. She looked at Sienna, who was currently pouting near a sculpture looking for attention. Watch, Lane said. She broke away from Dominic and walked toward the restrooms, timing her path to intersect with Sienna. As she passed, she accidentally stepped on the train of Sienna's dress. Sienna stumbled forward, crashing into the waiter. The tray of red wine went airborne. It didn't hit Sienna. It hit Graham, who had just stepped up to scold her. Splash! Gallons of expensive Cabernet soaked the front of Graham's white tuxedo shirt and dripped down his jacket. The room gasped. You idiot! Graham roared at Sienna, his face turning purple. I didn't do it, she tripped me! Sienna shrieked, pointing at Lane. But Lane was already 10 feet away, looking shocked and innocent, her hands over her mouth. Oh my goodness, are you all right? Graham ripped his jacket off, shaking the wine from it. He threw it over the arm of a nearby chair, furious. Get me a towel. Someone get me a fresh shirt. His security team swarmed him, trying to do damage control. In the chaos, the jacket lay unattended on the velvet chair for exactly 6 seconds. That was all Beatrice needed. From the shadows of a pillar, the handler dressed as a catering manager swept past the chair. Her hand moved with the speed of a magician. She didn't take the key. She pressed a mold against it through the fabric, then slipped a high-resolution scanner into the pocket for 2 seconds before retrieving it. She caught Lane's eye from across the room and gave a barely perceptible nod. We have the key. Graham grabbed his jacket back, checking the pocket immediately. He felt the key. He sighed in relief, glaring at Sienna. He had no idea the key had just been cloned. Lane retreated to the balcony, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked out over Central Park. The first phase was done. They had the location, they had the key. Now they had to break into the boathouse. But Graham was spooked. He wasn't staying at the party. "Hugo!" Graham barked into his earpiece. "Bring the car around. We're going to the Catskills tonight. I want to check the package personally." Lane heard the order through her earpiece. She froze. "Dominic," she whispered into her mic. "He's leaving. He's going to the boathouse. If he gets there before we do, he'll move the ledger. We can't beat him there by car." Dominic's voice crackled back. "Traffic is gridlocked." Lane looked at the sky. "We don't need a car." She turned and ran toward the service elevator, ripping the slit of her dress higher to allow her to run. She met Dominic on the roof of the museum. Wind whipped her hair as she saw it, Arthur's private helicopter, idling on the pad blades, spinning a blur against the night sky. "Can you fly this thing?" Lane shouted over the roar of the rotors. "I can," Dominic shouted back, grinning, "but it's going to be a bumpy ride." Lane climbed into the cockpit, strapping herself in. She looked down at the city lights one last time. The housewife was gone. The victim was dead. "Let's go get my alimony," she said. The helicopter banked sharply, soaring over the Hudson River, racing the black sedan that was speeding north on the highway below. The race for the Doomsday Book was on. The helicopter cut through the heavy storm clouds over the Catskills, buffeted by winds that made the metal frame groan. Dominic fought the controls, his knuckles white. "I can't land on the pad," he shouted over the headset. "The wind shear is too strong near the cliffs. I have to put us down in the clearing 1/2 mile south." "Do it," Lane commanded. She was checking the tracking dot on the tablet. "Graham is 10 minutes out. He's driving like a maniac." The helicopter descended rapidly tree branches, whipping against the landing skids. As soon as they touched down in the muddy field, Lane threw the door open. Rain instantly soaked her gown, the heavy velvet clinging to her legs. She didn't care. She kicked off her high heels and pulled a pair of tactical boots from the survival kit under the seat. "Stay with the bird. Keep the rotors spinning," Lane yelled to Dominic. "You can't go alone. I know the layout. You keep the engine running for the extract." Lane sprinted into the dark woods. Branches tore at her dress and scratched her face, but she felt no pain, only a cold, driving adrenaline. She knew these woods. She had walked them 1,000 times during the lonely weekends, while Graham was working in the city. She reached the perimeter of the estate. The boathouse sat on the edge of the dark lake, a modern structure of glass and steel. It looked peaceful, but Lane knew it was a fortress. She reached the keypad. Her hands were shaking. "Focus." She held the cloned key fob against the sensor. Beep. The red light turned green. Step 1 complete. She pushed the door open. The interior was pitch black. She tapped her earpiece. "Beatrice, I'm in. Disarm the voice recognition." "Stand by." Beatrice's voice came through clear and calm from the command center in New York, playing synthesized audio file Gamma 9 protocol override. A robotic voice from the house system responded. "Voice print confirmed. Welcome, Mr. Prentice." Lane exhaled. She ran to the painting on the far wall, a pretentious abstract piece Graham had bought for $2 million. She gripped the frame and swung it open. There was the safe. She placed the synthetic fingerprint mold Beatrice had made onto the scanner. It whirred. Access granted. The heavy steel door swung open. Lane reached inside her heart, hammering against her ribs. Her fingers brushed against cold leather. She pulled it out. The black ledger. It was heavier than it looked. She opened it to a random page. It was filled with Graham's handwriting columns of numbers, dates, and names. Senator Higgins, Judge Reynolds, Offshore routing number 445. I got it, Lane whispered. I got the... Suddenly floodlights blinded her from the driveway. Tires screeched on gravel. Lane! Dominic screamed in her ear. He's there, he's blocking the driveway. Lane spun around. Through the glass walls, she saw Graham's Mercedes skid to a halt. Graham jumped out, not waiting for his security team. He had a tire iron in his hand, his face twisted in a mask of rage. He saw the open door. He saw the figure inside. "Hey!" Graham roared, his voice carrying over the wind. He was running toward the door. He was 30 seconds away. Lane couldn't go back out the front. She looked at the back of the boathouse toward the lake. There was a small service door, but it led to the dock. "Dominic, I'm flushed out. I'm heading to the water. I can't land on the water." "Lane, just get the bird in the air. Hover over the end of the pier." Lane shoved the ledger into the waterproof waistband of her dress and bolted for the back door. She burst out onto the wooden dock just as Graham kicked in the front door of the boathouse. "Lane!" Graham screamed, seeing her running figure. "I will kill you!" He chased her. He was faster. The rain made the wood slick. Lane slipped her knee, slamming into the deck, but she scrambled up. The helicopter roared overhead, the downdraft whipping the lake water into a frenzy. Dominic dropped the helicopter as low as he dared, the skids hovering 5 feet above the swaying dock. "Jump!" Dominic yelled. Lane reached the end of the pier. Graham was 10 feet behind her. He lunged, swinging the tire iron. It missed her head by inches, splintering the wood railing. Lane didn't look back. She leaped into the void. Her hands caught the cold metal skid of the helicopter. Her body dangled over the black water. "Pull up! Pull up!" she screamed. Graham reached the edge of the dock, grabbing for her ankle. His fingertips brushed her boot, but the helicopter surged upward, lifting her out of reach. Graham stood on the end of the dock, drenched in rain, watching his ex-wife hang from the landing skid of a billionaire's helicopter, carrying his life's secrets away into the night. He threw the tire iron into the lake and let out a primal scream of defeat. Back in the safety of Calloway Tower, the atmosphere was electric. Arthur Calloway sat at the head of the table, wearing a silk robe, examining the ledger with a jeweler's loupe. Lane sat opposite him, wrapped in a blanket, shivering slightly, a cup of hot tea in her hands. Arthur closed the book. He took off his glasses and looked at Lane with pure reverence. "You didn't just find tax fraud, Lane," Arthur said softly. "You found treason." "Treason?" Lane asked. "He's been selling user data from his tech platforms to foreign intelligence agencies. He's been laundering money for cartels to prop up his real estate losses. If this gets out, he doesn't just go to jail. He goes to a black site." "So we release it," Lane said. "We send it to the Times. Tonight." "No," Arthur said. "If we leak it now, he'll claim it's a forgery. He'll spin the narrative. He controls the media cycles. He'll say you're a bitter ex-wife who forged documents to extort him. He'll bury the truth in noise. Then what do? We let him sue you." Arthur smiled. Lane blinked. "Excuse me. Graham is arrogant," Arthur explained. "He knows you have the book. He's already filed an emergency injunction, claiming you stole proprietary corporate secrets. He wants to gag you. He's demanded an emergency hearing at the Superior Court tomorrow morning to get a restraining order and a warrant for your arrest. He wants to arrest me, yes, and we are going to let him try, because in a court of law, once evidence is entered into the record to defend yourself, it becomes public record, and it becomes privileged. He can't sue you for defamation if you prove it's true under oath." Lane understood. "He's dragging me to court to silence me, but he's actually handing me the microphone." "Exactly. But you need to be careful. He has Judge Harrison, Harrison is on page 42 of this ledger. He took a bribe in 2019. Great, Lane sighed. So the judge is crooked too. That, Arthur's eyes twinkled, is the best part. But we need one more thing. The ledger is handwriting. He will claim it's not his. We need a witness to corroborate the digital transfers. We don't have one, Dominic said from the doorway, toweling off his wet hair. We might, Lane said slowly. She remembered the gala. She remembered the wine spill. She remembered the look on Sienna's face when Graham humiliated her. Sienna. The mistress, Dominic scoffed. She's a gold digger. She won't turn on him. She's not just a gold digger, Lane said. She's a woman who is realizing she's replaceable. Graham humiliated her in front of New York's elite. And I know Sienna. She's not loyal to Graham. She's loyal to the lifestyle. If she thinks Graham is going down, she'll want a lifeboat. Lane stood up, the blanket falling away. Give me a phone. I need to make a call. The call took place at 3 a.m. Lane didn't beg. She simply sent Sienna a photo of a document from the ledger, a transfer of $500,000 intended for an engagement ring for Sienna, which Graham had cancelled and redirected to his offshore account the very next day. Lane's text was simple. He's not going to marry you. He's moving the money to flee the country. Help me, and you get the reward money for the IRS whistleblower tip. Stay with him, and you go down as an accomplice. 3 dots appeared on the screen. Then a single word. Where the morning of the hearing, the plaza outside the New York Superior Court was a circus. Graham Prentice had leaked the story to the press painting Lane as a mentally unstable thief who had broken into his home. She's dangerous, Graham told the reporters, looking solemn in a navy suit. She attacked me. She stole trade secrets to sell to competitors. I just want my company safe. He walked up the steps, flanked by high-priced lawyers. He felt good. Judge Harrison owed him. The police were waiting inside to arrest Lane the moment she stepped into the courtroom. He had won. Inside the courtroom was packed. The air was thick with tension. Case 409, Prentice versus Prentice, the bailiff announced. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. He looked annoyed. Is the defendant present? Graham's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, Mrs. Prentice has fled. She is likely trying to sell the stolen data as we speak. We ask for a summary judgment and an immediate arrest warrant. The judge nodded. It appears the defendant has shown her contempt for this court by... A low rumble shook the windows. It grew louder, a roaring whine that drowned out the judge. People looked around, confused. Outside traffic on Center Street came to a halt. A massive shadow passed over the courthouse steps. The Gulfstream G650ER, painted in matte black with the Callaway crest on the tail, didn't land on the street, obviously, but the live news feed on the phones of every reporter in the room showed what was happening at Teterboro Airport just minutes away, where the jet had just touched down. But Lane wasn't at the airport. The courtroom doors banged open. Silence swept the room. Lane Prentice stood there. She wasn't wearing the outlet store sweater. She was wearing a white power suit that looked like armor. Her hair was slicked back, her face sharp and determined. Behind her walked Arthur Callaway Dominic and a team of 6 lawyers carrying heavy boxes. And behind them, looking terrified but resolute, was Sienna. Graham's face went pale. He stood up, knocking his chair over. She's here. Arrest her. She has the stolen property. Sit down, Mr. Prentice. Judge Harrison barked, though he looked nervous seeing Arthur Callaway. Lane walked down the center aisle, the click of her heels the only sound in the room. She stopped at the defense table and looked Graham dead in the eye. I haven't stolen anything, Your Honor. Lane said, her voice projecting to the back of the room without a microphone. I have simply retrieved marital assets that were concealed during the divorce proceedings. Objection, Graham's lawyer screamed. These are trade secrets. No, Lane said, lifting a box onto the table. These are records of felonies. This is a family court matter regarding a restraining order, the judge said, sweating. We are not here to litigate fraud. Actually, Arthur Calloway stepped forward, his voice booming. We are. Because if the plaintiff is using funds obtained through criminal enterprise to pay for this very lawsuit, the court is an accessory to money laundering. The press in the gallery went wild, cameras flashing. Clear the court, the judge yelled. You can't clear the record, Lane shouted over the noise. She pulled the black ledger from the box. I have evidence that Graham Prentice has hidden $300 million in assets. And I have evidence that on June 4th, 2019, he paid a bribe of $50,000 to a consultant named Harrison. She looked directly at the judge. The judge froze. His gavel hung in the air. That's a lie, Graham screamed. It's a forgery. Is it? Lane turned to the back of the room. Sienna. Sienna stood up, her hands trembling. It's not a lie, she said, her voice small but audible. I saw him write it. I saw him pay the courier, and I have the recording. Sienna held up her phone. Graham looked at Sienna, the color draining from his face. You, after everything I bought you. You bought me with stolen money, Graham, Sienna spat. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Marshals tried to restore order, but it was too late. The thread had been pulled. Lane looked at Graham across the aisle. He looked small now. The billionaire facade was crumbling. I told you, Lane said, her voice calm amidst the storm. I'm not boring, Graham. I'm thorough. But the drama wasn't over. As the marshals moved to secure the room, a man in a trench coat stood up from the back row. He flashed a badge. FBI, he announced. Nobody leave the room. Mrs. Prentice, please hand over the ledger. Graham smiled weakly. See, the feds are here for you. The agent walked past Lane. He walked past the defense table. He stopped in front of Graham. Graham Prentice, the agent said, pulling out handcuffs. You are under arrest for racketeering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. He turned to the bench. And Judge Harrison, we'll be needing a word with you, too. Lane watched as they cuffed Graham. He looked at her one last time, his eyes filled with shock. He mouthed one word. How Lane didn't answer. She simply picked up her bag, turned to Arthur, and smiled. I think, she said, I'm ready for lunch now. 6 months had passed since the gavel fell in Judge Harrison's courtroom, or rather, since it was frozen in mid-air by the arrival of the FBI. The fallout had been nuclear. The Prentice scandal dominated the news cycle for weeks. Graham Prentice, the golden boy of the tech world, was exposed not as a genius, but as a glorified con artist who had built his castle on a swamp of laundered cartel money and stolen algorithms. The stock for Prentice Holdings didn't just crash, it evaporated. On a crisp Tuesday morning in May, Lane stood in the grand foyer of the Greenwich estate. The house was empty now. The furniture had been seized by the feds, the art auctioned off to pay creditors. The marble floors, once echoing with the sounds of Graham's pretentious parties, were silent. Sold. The auctioneer said, his voice echoing in the empty hall. To the Vance Trust for $4.2 million. Lane lowered her paddle. It was a steal. The house was valued at $20 million. But nobody wanted to touch a property tainted by such scandal. Nobody except Lane. Are you sure you want to live here, Lane? Arthur asked, standing beside her in his signature tweed. It has ghosts. I'm not going to live here, Arthur, Lane replied, looking at the spot on the floor where she used to scrub scuff marks on her hands and knees because Graham said the maids missed spots I bought it to burn it down. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Metaphorically. No. Actually, Lane said, though a small smile played on her lips. I'm tearing the structure down. I'm donating the land to the city. It's going to be a park. The Lane Vance Community Garden. I think Graham would hate that. Children playing on his manicured lawn, dogs running free. It's perfect. He would hate it, Arthur chuckled. Speaking of our mutual friend, his sentencing hearing was this morning. Did you hear? I was busy buying a house. Lane shrugged, feigning indifference, but her heart skipped a beat. 15 years, Arthur said. Federal, no parole. And since Sienna testified, she got immunity and a nice payout from the IRS whistleblower fund. She's moving to Bali to become a yoga instructor. Good for her, Lane said. She did the right thing in the end, even if it was for the money. And what about you? Arthur asked. You have the settlement money. You have the profits from the short sale we did on Prentice stock. You're worth more now than Graham ever was. You could retire. Lane turned to look out the window at the overgrown garden. She thought about the woman she was 6 months ago, trembling in a trench coat, accepting $50,000 to disappear. She thought about the fire that had ignited in her belly in that library. I'm not retiring, Lane said. I'm just getting started. There are a lot of Grahams out there, Arthur. A lot of women who are told to sign the papers and go away quietly. I think I'd like to help them. Arthur grinned, the expression of a man who had just won the biggest bet of his life. Vance and Calloway Forensic Auditing has a nice ring to it. Vance and Calloway. Lane tested the name. I like it. She walked to the front door, the heavy oak slab that Graham had slammed in her face so many times. She opened it, letting the spring sunlight flood the dark hallway. As she walked down the driveway, a familiar roar filled the sky. The black Gulf Stream, G650ER, banked overhead, tipping its wings in a salute. Dominic was piloting, waiting to take them to London for their first international client meeting. Lane didn't look back at the mansion. She checked her watch, a Patek Philippe that she had bought for herself. She was on time. She was in control. And she was finally, truly free. The woman who accepted the divorce with nothing had returned to court with everything. And in the end, the best revenge wasn't the billions, or the jet, or the house. It was the look on Graham's face when he realized that the wife he threw away was the architect of his destruction. Lane Vance climbed into the waiting car. She had work to do. Lane's story is a stark reminder that in the game of life, the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting the loudest. It's the one who listens, observes, and remembers. Graham Prentice made the fatal error of confusing silence for weakness. He thought stripping Lane of her assets would strip her of her power, forgetting that her true value lay in her resilience and her intellect. Money can be stolen. Houses can be seized. But the truth is a boomerang. You can throw it away as hard as you want, but it will always come back to hit you. Lane didn't just survive her divorce. She leveraged the very underestimate that was meant to crush her. She proved that when you have nothing left to lose, you have everything to gain. Wow, that was the story of Lane and Graham. From a rainy sidewalk with a $50,000 check to owning the skies in a private jet, what a journey. It just goes to show you should never let anyone tell you what you're worth. If you enjoyed Lane's revenge and want to hear more stories about karma justice and rising from the ashes, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. What would you have done in Lane's shoes? Would you have taken the money and ran, or would you have fought back? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.